Hey, I'm Nathan Cole from Fatal Files, and today we're diving into influencer deaths. And honestly, every single one of these people saw the warning signs and just kept going anyway. From an urban explorer descending alone into a sealed underground basement to a DIY rocket builder who strapped himself to a homemade explosive device, which ended in the most catastrophic way possible. It was August 22, 2017. In the basement of a defunct shopping mall in Akron, Ohio. The temperature outside had reached 89 degrees Fahrenheit, but the underground levels remained cool and damp from decades of neglect. Garrett Voss was 31 years old and worked the night shift at a warehouse loading dock while spending his weekends exploring abandoned buildings for his urban exploration blog. Garrett had been documenting forgotten places for 2 years, building a following of 3,200 subscribers who enjoyed his fearless approach to trespassing in restricted areas. Friends described him as a thrill seeker who constantly pushed boundaries, often bragging about evading security guards and ignoring posted warnings. The mall had been abandoned for over a decade, its interior stripped to bare concrete. Garrett learned previous urban explorers had documented only the main retail floors, not the basement levels. Garrett's channel was struggling against competition from other explorers who had already covered most accessible abandoned locations in Ohio. His view counts had been declining for months, and he desperately needed exclusive footage from a place no other content creator had documented. The mall's basement utility levels represented virgin territory that could give him a significant advantage over his competitors. He had spent weeks planning this exploration, studying building blueprints and identifying the safest entry points. Garrett recruited a camera operator to wait outside while he explored alone, wanting to maintain his reputation as a fearless solo explorer who didn't need backup or safety support. The basement entrance was located behind the former department store Anchor, accessible through a damaged service door that had been pried open by previous trespassers. As Garrett approached the opening, he noticed a strong chemical smell, but dismissed it as typical for old buildings that had been sealed for years. Garrett's determination to capture never-before-seen footage outweighed any safety concerns. He had built his entire online persona around being the explorer who went where others wouldn't dare, and backing down now would damage his credibility with his audience. On the afternoon of August 22nd, Garrett descended into the basement level through the damaged service entrance. His camera operator remained outside, monitoring Garrett's progress through a wireless video feed that transmitted his footage in real time. The underground corridors were pitch black, requiring Garrett to use powerful LED lights to illuminate his path. Garrett moved through several utility corridors, documenting rusted pipes, abandoned electrical equipment, and decades of accumulated debris. The chemical smell grew stronger as he ventured deeper underground, but Garrett continued filming, excited about the exclusive content he was capturing for his channel. The camera operator outside lost contact with Garrett's wireless video feed shortly before Garrett entered the sealed utility room, likely due to underground interference. After 30 minutes of exploration, Garrett discovered a sealed utility room that appeared completely untouched since the mall's closure. The heavy metal door was locked, but Garrett had brought tools specifically for bypassing such obstacles. He forced open the door and entered with his camera equipment, eager to document whatever lay inside. The room contained decades-old gas pipes that had slowly displaced breathable oxygen inside the sealed space. Without proper ventilation, oxygen levels inside the room had fallen to dangerously low levels over the years. Garrett had no way of detecting the hazard as he stepped into the contaminated environment. The oxygen-depleted air caused Garrett to lose consciousness within seconds of entering the room. His camera continued recording as he collapsed to the concrete floor, while the wireless monitoring feed failed due to the depth of the underground location. Garrett died from asphyxiation caused by oxygen-depleted air in the sealed utility room. After Garrett failed to return at their agreed check-in time, the camera operator contacted emergency services. Responders later entered the basement with ventilation equipment and recovered Garrett's body. Investigators also retrieved his camera, which contained uninterrupted footage of his final exploration. The video was retained as evidence and was never publicly released. The lower utility levels of the abandoned mall were subsequently secured due to hazardous air conditions. It was August 12, 2017, along the coastline of Negros Oriental, Philippines. The tide had pulled back across a wide shelf of black volcanic rock, leaving shallow tide pools scattered between the stones. By late afternoon, a small tripod stood near the edge of the rocks while beachgoers moved quietly along the shoreline. Earlier that year, Cherry Dela Cruz, 26, had started a small YouTube channel built around beach foraging and inexpensive seafood mukbang videos. Online, she presented herself as someone comfortable along the shore, often speaking as if she had grown up around the ocean. In reality, Cherry was a city girl from Cebu City who had spent most of her life far from tide pools or fishing villages. Most of what she knew about shellfish came from watching local collectors along the shoreline and quickly researching species online before filming. That afternoon, she set up her phone beside a rocky inlet where tide pools formed between slick patches of algae-covered stone. Cherry placed several shells and small sea creatures onto a plastic tray, while her younger sister stood nearby, reading live-stream comments aloud. The plan was simple. Cherry would show viewers what she found in the tide pools, explain where each shell came from, and later cook anything edible. One shell in particular caught her attention. It was small and rounded, marked with pale brown triangular patterns that formed a faint net-like design across the shell. Light enough to sit comfortably in her palm, it looked like a harmless decorative shell someone might collect on a beach. Cherry turned it slowly between her fingers while explaining she had found it beneath a rock only minutes earlier. Then her hand jerked. A tiny puncture appeared near the base of her thumb. Cherry rubbed the spot and laughed, telling viewers it felt like a sharp sting. People nearby later said she mentioned it casually before continuing the video. At that moment, the sting seemed minor. For several minutes, nothing dramatic happened. Cherry continued arranging shells across the tray while talking to viewers. Then, her sister noticed something strange. Cherry began dropping items she had already picked up. A man collecting shells about 10 feet away later told investigators her movement suddenly looked slow and unsteady. Her speech began to blur. Words ran together, and sentences stopped halfway through. A woman walking along the rocks later said Cherry kept blinking repeatedly as if struggling to focus on the phone camera. Cherry tried to sit up straighter, but her shoulders sagged. Moments later, she tipped forward, striking the edge of the tray with her cheek before sliding sideways onto the rock. Her sister dropped the phone and shouted for help, while nearby beachgoers rushed across the tide pools. Several people carried Cherry toward the road, while someone ran to a nearby house to call emergency services. Witnesses said her breathing became shallow and irregular as they waited. Emergency responders arrived roughly 30 minutes later and attempted resuscitation, but Cherry had already stopped breathing. During the medical examination, investigators documented a small puncture wound on her thumb. Toxicology findings and witness statements helped reconstruct what had happened. The shell she had been holding was identified as a cone snail. Cone snail venom contains powerful neurotoxins capable of blocking the nerve signals that control muscles used for breathing. Even a small sting can cause rapid paralysis. The medical examiner ruled Cherry's death an accidental marine envenomation. Witnesses confirmed she had been holding the shell moments before the sting, and investigators found no signs of foul play. In the days after the incident, local collectors and residents along the shoreline began warning visitors not to handle unfamiliar shells in the tide pools. Cherry's body was later returned to Cebu City, where her family arranged her funeral after authorities ruled the death an accidental marine envenomation. It was the morning of April 7, 2018, on a whitewater river running through a narrow canyon in the western part of Oregon. The river had been running well above its normal level for several weeks, following an unusually heavy spring snowmelt, and the water moving through the canyon section that morning was pushing through at a volume significantly beyond what the route carried in a normal season. Reed Bellick was 37 years old and taught shop at a high school in a small river town where he had lived for 6 years. Outside of the school year, he spent most of his time on the water, and he had been filming kayak runs for 3 years on a channel aimed at intermediate paddlers looking to move into more technical whitewater. At school, he was steady and practical, the kind of teacher who emphasized preparation and repetition before attempting anything new. On the river, though, he relied more on instinct and the experience he had built over time, often treating past success as enough reason to move forward without seeking additional input. He had run this particular river twice before, both times in late summer when the water was low and the features in the canyon section were well within his ability. The spring of 2018 gave him that opportunity earlier than expected. Snowmelt across the region had pushed the river to levels that effectively reclassified the canyon section, turning a manageable series of Class 3 drops into something running closer to Class 4 and 5, depending on the feature. He arrived at the put-in alone on a Saturday morning in early April. A laminated advisory had been posted at the put-in noting elevated water levels and recommending against solo runs until conditions dropped. He filmed the sign briefly during his introduction before continuing his setup. He wore a helmet and a personal flotation device, but carried no communication device and left no float plan with anyone on shore. He launched into the current and paddled the first open stretch without difficulty before the canyon walls began closing in around the route. The canyon section started approximately a mile and a half below the put-in. At normal levels, the route through it was readable, with defined lines and enough recoverable eddies between drops to stop, assess, and reposition as needed. At the water level present that morning, none of that structure existed in the same way. Several of the drops that had distinct hydraulic features at low water had washed out entirely, replaced by continuous, fast-moving water with no clear recovery points between them. Reed ran the first 2 drops without incident. The third was a feature that at normal levels presented as a straightforward pour-over with a clean exit line on the left side of the channel. At the volume running that morning, it had reconfigured into a recirculating hydraulic extending across most of the channel width. From upstream, the left side still appeared to offer the clearest approach, and he committed to that line. The hydraulic stopped the kayak on entry and pulled him into a recirculating cycle below the surface. He was separated from the kayak during the recirculating sequence. His body moved downstream with the current and came to rest against a strainer formed by a downed tree spanning most of the channel approximately 80 feet below the hydraulic. A group of hikers on a trail running above the canyon rim observed a kayak moving through the canyon without a paddler shortly after the drop, and later spotted a figure against the strainer from their position on the trail above. The river was not accessible from the trail at that point, and they had no way to reach him directly. Reed was recovered from the strainer by a water rescue team later that afternoon. The cause of death was drowning following entrapment at a strainer after being flushed out of a recirculating hydraulic. The helmet camera was recovered with the kayak downstream, with footage intact up to the moment he entered the hydraulic. The recording became unusable from that point, and the remainder of the sequence was reconstructed from physical evidence and the hiker accounts above the rim. The advisory at the put-in, the absence of a float plan, and the solo run under those conditions were all entered into the record. The case was ruled an accidental death. Advisory signage at the put-in was later updated to include high water warnings and photographic examples of the canyon section at elevated flow. It was November 8, 2017, in Columbus, Ohio, as a quiet suburban neighborhood settled into a cool autumn evening, with most houses dimming their lights while families turned in for the night. Inside a single-family home, activity continued in an upstairs bedroom that had been converted into a filming space. Celine Vaughn was 19 years old, a community college sophomore living at home and working part-time at a craft store. Outside of school, she ran a slime tutorial channel across multiple social platforms, where longer, uninterrupted videos that combined several recipes had recently gained more traction and higher watch time. In an effort to keep up with similar creators and push her content further, she began planning extended filming sessions designed to hold viewer attention for as long as possible, a format that would ultimately require multiple heat-based setups running at the same time. The project required different temperature conditions, so Celine set up multiple workstations throughout her bedroom. Extension cords and power strips supplied electricity to several hot glue guns, while a heavy-duty extension cord ran from a hallway outlet to power one of the electric heating plates used to warm materials. The layout was arranged to support filming and workflow rather than separating heat sources from nearby materials. By 9 p.m., recording had begun. The camera showed several heating devices already operating as Celine moved between stations, keeping multiple mixtures in progress at once. To avoid interrupting the session, some heating equipment remained powered on while she worked elsewhere in the room. As the session extended past 3 hours, the density of equipment became a factor. One heating plate had been placed on a low surface near the bed, beneath a cloth covering used to protect furniture from spills. The plate continued operating without adjustment, while other stations demanded attention. Electrical load increased as multiple devices ran simultaneously through shared power strips. As the filming session continued into its 4th hour, conditions in the room deteriorated. The heating plate near the bed operated continuously, its surface temperature rising beyond what the cloth barrier beneath it could tolerate. Heat transferred into the fabric, which began to discolor and smolder. With no airflow and no interruption to the power source, the smolder progressed to open flame. Fires spread quickly from the cloth to nearby craft paper, packaging, and synthetic materials stored along the wall. Within minutes, flames reached additional electrical cords and plastic components. Melting insulation and burning synthetic materials produced thick, toxic smoke that filled the upper portion of the room. The camera continued recording as visibility dropped. Flames advanced across multiple surfaces and heat intensified rapidly. The primary exit, the bedroom doorway, became obstructed by fire and smoke before effective escape was possible. The confined layout, combined with the amount of combustible material, allowed the fire to grow faster than it could be contained. Fire investigators determined that the blaze originated from an electric heating plate that had been left operating on flammable fabric near the bed. The device had been running unattended for an extended period, allowing heat to build until nearby materials ignited. As the fire spread, additional craft supplies, cords, and synthetic materials fueled rapid flame growth and produced heavy smoke throughout the room. Neighbors noticed smoke coming from an upstairs window and contacted emergency services. Firefighters arrived to find the bedroom heavily damaged, with much of the interior already consumed by fire. A recording device was recovered near the original filming area, and its final footage confirmed that multiple heating devices had been operating at the time the fire began. Celine Vaughn was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was smoke inhalation, with contributing thermal injuries resulting from an accidental residential fire. Investigators found no evidence of equipment malfunction, concluding that the fire was caused by prolonged use of heating equipment during filming and unsafe placement of heat sources near combustible materials.
It was May 14, 2016. In a quiet Raleigh neighborhood under mild spring skies, a single-story home's primary bathroom had been set up for filming. The small 8 by 10 foot space held a bathtub filled with about 10 inches of hot water, the door locked from the inside, and a phone mounted on a tripod aimed toward the tub. Rigby Thant had planned the session carefully. At 26, he worked at a dental office handling appointments and patient records, but his online presence focused entirely on bath and wellness products. His content featured product reviews, relaxation routines, and self-care demonstrations. He had disclosed his severe almond allergy multiple times in previous videos, noting that even trace exposure caused significant reactions. That afternoon, he had received a handmade bath bomb in the mail from a follower. The package included no ingredient list, no labeling, and no return address. He decided to test it on camera. The live stream began in the early evening. He showed the bath bomb to the camera, a large sphere wrapped in plain tissue paper. He unwrapped it and dropped it into the hot water. It fizzed immediately, releasing a cloud of fragrance and dissolving rapidly. Steam began rising from the surface, carrying the scent upward in visible wisps. As the bath bomb broke apart, a thick layer of oil spread across the water, creating an iridescent sheen. The fragrance was sweet and nutty, intensifying as the steam filled the small enclosed space. He eased himself into the tub, settling back as the product continued to dissolve. With each breath, he drew in the humid air saturated with aerosolized particles from the dissolving oils. Within minutes, his skin began to react. Small raised hives appeared across his chest and spread up his neck. He touched his throat, his expression shifting from relaxed to confused. He began coughing, shallow at first, then more forceful. His breathing changed, becoming audibly strained. His voice, when he tried to speak toward the camera, came out hoarse and tight. The allergic reaction was progressing rapidly, the inhalation of airborne almond proteins accelerating the response beyond what skin contact alone would have triggered. He gripped the sides of the tub and tried to stand. His feet slipped on the oil-slicked porcelain. His balance failed. He fell backward, the back of his head striking the curved edge of the tub with a dull impact. The blow stunned him. He slid sideways, his torso tipping into the shallow water. His airway, already swelling from anaphylaxis, took in water. His chest movements became erratic and shallow. Consciousness faded. He remained partially submerged, face down in less than a foot of water. A neighbor who regularly watched and moderated his live streams noticed the feed had gone still. After several minutes without movement, she called his phone. No answer. Concerned, she walked over and knocked. The front door was unlocked, but the bathroom door was not. She called emergency services at approximately 7:35 p.m. Responders arrived and forced entry into the bathroom. Rigby was found face down in the water, unresponsive. His skin showed widespread hives and significant facial swelling. He was pulled from the tub and CPR was initiated immediately. His airway was severely compromised. Advanced medical intervention was attempted, but cardiac activity could not be sustained. He was transported and pronounced dead shortly after arrival at a nearby hospital. The medical examiner conducted an autopsy and determined the cause of death to be anaphylaxis due to almond oil exposure, with contributing factors of blunt head trauma and drowning. Toxicology confirmed the presence of allergens consistent with unrefined almond oil. Police collected the remnants of the bath bomb, which tested positive for concentrated almond oil. The packaging was logged as evidence. No signs of intentional harm or tampering were discovered. The incident was classified as accidental. Investigators concluded that the combination of severe allergic reaction triggered by inhalation of aerosolized almond proteins in the steam-filled bathroom, the head injury from the fall, and subsequent submersion in water had created a fatal sequence of events.
It was November 3rd, 2019, when 21-year-old Blake Cooper entered carrying 40 pounds of camera equipment for his urban exploration documentation. Blake worked night shifts at a warehouse while creating content for around 4,700 subscribers during daylight hours. His methodical personality and attention to architectural details had earned him a reputation among urban exploration enthusiasts for thorough, well-researched videos. The 12-story hotel had been condemned for over 15 years following multiple fires and extensive water damage. City inspectors had scheduled a final structural assessment for the following week before planned demolition. Blake had researched the building's history extensively and identified specific areas of architectural interest for his planned rooftop sunset shoot. Blake's girlfriend expected regular text updates throughout his exploration, a safety protocol they had established after previous incidents in the urban exploration community. He had also informed her of his planned return time and vehicle location as standard practice for solo explorations. Blake began his ascent methodically, testing floor stability with a metal rod and documenting each level with his handheld camera. The lower floors showed typical signs of abandonment, but remained structurally sound. As he progressed higher, fire damage became more extensive, with missing interior walls and visible concrete deterioration. By the 8th floor, Blake encountered significant structural compromise. Years of water infiltration had corroded reinforcing steel, causing concrete delamination and significantly reducing the slab's load-bearing capacity. Despite these warning signs, Blake continued toward his target location near the exterior windows where he planned to capture city views. Blake's camera was recording when he stepped onto what appeared to be a stable concrete slab near the building's exterior wall. The section, weakened by years of water damage and fire exposure, suddenly failed under his weight. The initial collapse caused Blake to fall through the failed floor slab and impact weakened sections below, triggering additional localized failures rather than a full progressive collapse. Blake fell through multiple weakened floors as each level failed under the impact and debris load. The collapse progressed downward until reaching a partially intact slab on the 5th floor where the failures stopped. When Blake failed to send his scheduled check-in message and did not return by his planned time, his girlfriend contacted authorities. Police located his vehicle outside the abandoned building and requested urban search and rescue teams to conduct a systematic search of the structure. Rescue teams used listening devices and visual inspections to search the collapsed section, though heavy debris significantly limited search effectiveness. The recovery operation required heavy equipment to safely remove concrete debris without causing additional structural instability. Blake was located under the rubble approximately 18 hours after the collapse, and he was pronounced deceased at the scene. Investigators recovered Blake's camera equipment from the debris field. While most devices were destroyed, a backup memory card survived and contained footage leading up to the structural failure. The video showed Blake's approach to the compromised section and documented the moment the floor gave way beneath him. The medical examiner determined that Blake died from multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a multi-story fall and impact from falling debris. The structural failure had occurred too rapidly for any survival response. City engineers conducted an emergency assessment of the building following the incident and accelerated demolition plans due to the demonstrated structural instability. Blake's death prompted the urban exploration community to develop enhanced safety protocols, including stronger recommendations for partner systems and remote check-in protocols during building explorations. The incident prompted increased security measures at several high-risk abandoned properties identified by city officials, including improved fencing and regular patrols to deter unauthorized access. The recovered footage was later referenced in safety discussions within the urban exploration community to demonstrate how quickly structural failures can occur in compromised buildings. Authorities concluded that the combination of fire damage, water infiltration, and steel corrosion had created an unpredictable failure point that appeared stable but could not support normal loads. The collapse demonstrated how localized structural failures can propagate vertically through compromised buildings. It was January 14, 2018, on a remote frozen lake in northern Minnesota, 40 miles from the nearest town. The temperature had dropped to -18 degrees Fahrenheit, with a brutal wind chill that made the air feel like razor blades against exposed skin. Jet Blackwood was 33 years old and worked as an insurance adjuster during the day, while spending his free time creating extreme challenge content for his YouTube channel. Jet had built a following of 4,800 subscribers by performing increasingly dangerous cold weather stunts, including ice swimming, snow cave survival challenges, and hypothermia endurance tests. Friends described him as an adrenaline junkie who constantly needed to top his previous achievements, often ignoring basic safety protocols in pursuit of viral content. The frozen lake stretched for 2 miles in each direction, covered by 18 inches of solid ice that had formed during weeks of sub-zero temperatures. Jet had chosen this remote location specifically to avoid interference from park rangers or concerned bystanders who might try to stop his most ambitious challenge yet. Jet's previous ice swimming video had drawn 50,000 views, prompting viewers to push him toward more extreme challenges. Seeking to escalate, he planned an underwater swim beneath thick ice, entering and exiting through a single hole. He based the idea on videos of professional ice divers, but ignored their use of guide ropes, safety divers, and air backups. Confident in his cold tolerance, Jet recruited a 3-person camera crew to film the stunt, promising them a share of the revenue once the video went viral. The crew spent 2 hours cutting a 4-foot square hole in the 18-inch ice using a chainsaw and ice picks. The opening revealed black water that looked like a portal to another world. Steam rose from the surface as the 34-degree water met the frigid air, creating an ominous atmosphere that should have served as a warning. On the afternoon of January 14th, Jet entered the water wearing only swimming trunks and a diving mask. His camera crew positioned themselves around the entry hole to film his descent and planned return. Jet took several deep breaths and dove underwater, beginning his swim parallel to the ice surface. The underwater environment was completely disorienting, with uniform white ice above and dark water below, providing no reference points for navigation. Jet had planned to swim in a straight line for 90 seconds before returning to the opening, but the featureless environment made it impossible to maintain direction or judge distance accurately. After 2 minutes underwater, Jet became confused about his location relative to the entry hole. The uniform ice ceiling and dark water below made it impossible to determine which direction led back to safety. He attempted to surface, but found only solid ice above him. Without a guide rope or reference points, Jet had no way to navigate back to the opening. Panic set in as he realized he was lost beneath the frozen surface as his breath hold time ran out. Jet swam frantically beneath the ice, searching for the entry hole as cold shock and oxygen deprivation impaired his coordination and judgment. The ice above him was too thick to break through, and the uniform white surface provided no visual reference points. Disoriented and running out of breath, he moved in widening arcs beneath the frozen lake, but was unable to locate the opening before disappearing from view. When Jet failed to resurface, the camera crew attempted to cut additional holes, but lacked the equipment and training required for ice rescue operations. Emergency services arrived 3 hours later, but were unable to locate him beneath the frozen surface. His body was recovered during the spring thaw 4 months later. Investigators reviewed the crew's footage and statements as part of the inquiry, but no usable underwater video was recovered. The incident was ruled an accidental death due to reckless behavior in hazardous conditions. Jet died from drowning and hypothermia beneath the ice. It was April 22, 2018. Along a narrow stretch of canal in Dearborn, Michigan, the water moved slowly beneath a concrete pedestrian bridge. A young man prepared equipment beside the riverbank while cyclists passed overhead as the quiet canal moved steadily beneath the concrete span. Earlier that morning, Derek Rojas, 27, arrived carrying a tripod, gloves, rope, and several heavy neodymium magnets used for magnet fishing. What began as a hobby had gradually turned into a small side hustle. The scrap metal he pulled from rivers, old tools, pipes, bicycle frames, could be taken to a recycling yard for a few dollars. Derek worked weekdays detailing cars at a repair shop, but the pay rarely covered everything. On weekends, he walked canals and riverbanks searching for metal worth recovering. Most finds were worthless scrap, but occasionally a heavier piece meant a little extra gas money. His small YouTube channel, followed by about 5,000 subscribers, documented the searches. Viewers watched for the chance that something unusual might surface. That afternoon, he chose a deeper section of canal beside the pedestrian bridge where decades of discarded metal had settled along the bottom. Derek set the tripod facing the canal before lowering the magnet into the water. Nearby warning signs cautioned about hazardous debris in the canal, but he continued anyway. Pedestrians crossed the bridge above him, and a man walking a dog paused nearby as Derek began dragging the magnet slowly along the canal floor before pulling it back up. The first few pulls brought up bolts and small pieces of scrap metal. Each time he dropped the magnet again, hoping for something heavier. On the sixth pull, the rope suddenly went tight. Derek leaned back and planted his boots against the concrete edge. Whatever was attached below felt heavier than the earlier finds. He hauled steadily until a tangled mass broke the surface. Rust-coated wire and twisted metal fragments clung tightly to the magnet. He pulled the bundle onto the edge of the concrete bank and crouched beside it, trying to separate the pieces from the magnet's powerful pull. The metal scraps were tightly knotted together. Each attempt to free them required him to pull the tangled bundle against the magnet's surface. The man with the dog later told investigators Derek seemed focused on untangling the debris so he could show it to the camera. While gripping the wire bundle with both hands, Derek leaned closer to see where the pieces were caught. The tension in the twisted scrap suddenly released. The metal shifted sharply in his hands, and Derek recoiled with a shout. He stumbled backward several steps before collapsing onto the concrete path beside the canal. The debris bundle fell beside him. The nearby pedestrian ran toward him, while two cyclists stopped on the bridge and shouted down. One of them called emergency services, while others kept people back. Blood was visible around Derek's face as he lay on the ground, barely moving. Witnesses said his breathing quickly became shallow and irregular. Paramedics arrived several minutes after the emergency call. They assessed the injury and attempted life-saving measures, but Derek showed no meaningful neurological response. He was pronounced dead at the scene. During the investigation, responders examined the debris Derek had pulled from the canal. Inside the tangled scrap, they found a long, rusted construction nail lodged through loops of twisted wire. Investigators determined that when the debris shifted under tension, the The rigid nail rotated outward from the tangle just as Derek leaned over the bundle. The point entered through his eye socket and penetrated the brain. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death as traumatic brain injury resulting from penetration through the orbital cavity. Within magnet fishing communities, the incident later circulated as a cautionary example. Authorities reminded hobby magnet fishers to treat recovered metal as hazardous and avoid leaning over tangled debris while separating it from powerful magnets. It was the evening of January 9th on a ridgeline in the eastern range of the Cascade Mountains in Washington state. The area sat roughly 14 miles from the nearest maintained road, accessible only by a Forest Service track that had been closed for 6 weeks by the time he arrived. The ridgeline itself was buried under several feet of accumulated snow, with no foot traffic recorded in the area since late November. Court Vassell was 31 years old and worked part-time at a sporting goods retailer while running a winter survival and backcountry camping channel he had been building for 4 years. The channel was built around a single premise, that he operated without assistance, without a safety handler off camera, and without any outside support during documented outings. He had addressed that framing directly in multiple videos, distinguishing his approach from creators who staged remote scenarios within easy reach of a road or kept a crew out of frame. His audience had internalized that standard and measured each new video against it. The 7-day winter solo had been announced publicly several weeks in advance. In the period between the announcement and his departure, the response had been the strongest the channel had seen in over a year. He posted a gear breakdown video before leaving, reviewing his kit on camera. His sleeping system was rated to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. The forecast for the ridgeline that week showed overnight lows between -5 and -15. He noted the gap on camera, framed it as a test of layering and shelter management, and did not adjust the kit. Several viewers with cold weather experience commented on the breakdown video, flagging the sleeping system rating directly. He did not respond and did not change anything before departure. He arranged for a single contact to expect him back at the trailhead closure point by the end of day 7. He carried no communication device beyond a personal locator beacon, which had been visible in the gear breakdown video. He had described it on camera as a last resort, framing its use as something that would end the trip and contradict everything the channel stood for. He reached the ridgeline camp by early afternoon on day 1 and spent the first hour setting up shelter and filming his introduction. On the morning of day 2, while collecting snow for water melt on a slope above camp, he stepped onto a snow bridge covering buried talus that collapsed beneath him, dropping him several feet and striking his left leg against the rock below. The chest camera captured the fall. He returned to camp without assistance, but his mobility was reduced from that point. The footage showed him assessing the injury inside the shelter, concluding it was not a fracture, and continuing to film. He did not activate the locator beacon. Over the following 2 days, the footage showed him managing the injury while the temperature continued to drop below what his sleeping system could compensate for. Movement around camp slowed. Fuel consumption ran ahead of his supply calculation as he struggled to keep his canister stove functioning in the sustained sub-zero temperatures. By the evening of day 4, he was conserving remaining fuel for water melt rather than cooking. And overnight, shelter temperatures were no longer being maintained at a safe level. The chest camera was last activated on the morning of day 5. The locator beacon was recovered from his unused kit. His contact reported his absence when he failed to return on day 7. The ridgeline camp was located by a search team on the 4th day of the operation. The approach on foot from the closure point along a snow-covered track, adding significant time to each search day. Court was found inside the shelter. The medical review determined hypothermia as the cause of death. The leg injury had reduced his capacity to generate body heat through movement, and combined with the underrated sleeping system and depleted fuel supply, his core temperature had dropped to a fatal level over the final days of the trip. The chest camera footage corroborated the physical evidence and established that no other parties had been present at any point. The beacon had never been activated. The footage was held in the case record. The case was closed as an accidental death. The gear rating against the recorded forecast, the injury sustained on day 2, and the beacon condition were all entered into the record. The 7-day timeline he had announced publicly and the single contact arrangement he had made before departure were the only reasons the camp was found when it was. No other parties were involved. It was April 3rd, 2018, in Houston, Texas, as a warm, humid spring afternoon settled over a quiet suburban neighborhood, with temperatures climbing toward early summer levels and families beginning their evening routines. Kai Wilde was 21 years old and a student at a local community college, studying communications while living with his parents and younger brother in a modest two-story house. He attended classes in the mornings and spent most afternoons producing content for a growing social media presence. His videos focused on eating challenges and endurance-based stunts, formats that had recently gained higher engagement and longer watch times across multiple platforms. In an effort to push his content further, Kai planned an extreme water consumption challenge inspired by widely publicized radio station contests from the early 2000s. The concept centered on consuming a large volume of water within a limited time frame. On the afternoon of April 3rd, he set up camera equipment in the family kitchen while the house was empty, arranging multiple gallon jugs of water on the counter alongside measuring cups and a timer. The setup was simple and visually clean. Clear plastic containers filled with tap water were positioned within the camera frame. The planned challenge involved consuming approximately 6 liters of water in under 2 hours, an amount that exceeded safe intake thresholds identified in documented cases of water intoxication. Recording began with Kai consuming the first portion of water without visible difficulty. Footage later reviewed showed him continuing the challenge at a steady pace, with no extended breaks between servings. As time passed, the total volume of water consumed increased rapidly, while the body was given little opportunity to process and eliminate the excess fluid. Midway through the recording, Kai continued drinking additional liters in succession. Changes in coordination and speech became visible on camera, consistent with early neurological effects associated with acute water intoxication. Despite these observable changes, the challenge continued uninterrupted. By the later stages of the session, the volume of water consumed had reached levels known to dilute blood sodium concentration at a dangerous rate. Medical literature identifies this condition, acute hyponatremia, as a major risk factor for brain swelling and neurological failure. Footage showed increasing physical instability as the recording progressed toward its final segment. Near the end of the session, Kai consumed the remaining water required to complete the challenge. The cumulative intake overwhelmed the body's ability to maintain electrolyte balance. Excess water entered cells throughout the body, including brain tissue, leading to cerebral edema. As pressure within the skull increased, neurological function rapidly deteriorated. The recording captured Kai collapsing in the kitchen shortly after the final stage of consumption. The camera continued recording as he lost consciousness. No further movement was observed. Emergency responders were later alerted, but by the time medical assistance arrived, Kai could not be revived. He was pronounced dead at the scene. A subsequent medical examination confirmed severe cerebral edema and critically low sodium levels. The official cause of death was determined to be acute water intoxication, resulting from excessive water consumption over a short period of time. Investigators concluded that Kai had voluntarily consumed approximately 6 liters of water in less than 2 hours during the recording session. The case was classified as an accidental death caused by a dangerous endurance challenge performed for online content. Video evidence documented the progression from initial consumption to collapse, providing a clear timeline of events. The challenge video was never uploaded, but the footage remained as evidence of how a widely underestimated stunt, scaled for views and engagement, became fatal.
It was October 9th, 2017. A San Diego apartment complex sat 3 blocks from the coast, its units filled with young professionals and freelancers. The evening was mild, with temperatures in the low 60s. Inside a second-floor unit, the kitchen had been transformed into a makeshift studio. Ring lights flanked a narrow counter. A cutting board sat in the center with a thawing whole pufferfish still partially frozen. A phone mounted on a stand captured the workspace from above. Vexi Kroot worked from this kitchen regularly. At 27, she earned income as a freelance food photographer, but her growing audience came from experimental cooking videos that pushed culinary boundaries. She had no formal chef training, no certifications in exotic food preparation, and no knowledge of legal restrictions surrounding certain ingredients. Her content thrived on spectacle and risk. Earlier that week, she had purchased the pufferfish frozen through an online specialty distributor that marketed exotic seafood but included fine print disclaimers prohibiting consumption. She ignored them. A friend sat off camera on a stool near the refrigerator, reading live comments from viewers. The stream began around 8:15 p.m. Vexy explained her intent to prepare and taste the fish, dismissing safety concerns as overly cautious. She used a standard kitchen knife to make the initial incisions. When she opened the abdominal cavity to remove the organs, the blade punctured the tissue, releasing internal fluids that spread across the cutting board. She rinsed the fish under tap water, but did not sanitize the workspace or change knives. Cross-contamination had occurred. She carved 2 thin slices from the dorsal section, each roughly the size of a poker chip. She held one up to the camera, then placed both on a small plate. At 8:32 p.m., she consumed them. The taste was mild, slightly sweet. She continued speaking to the camera, describing the texture. Within 5 to 7 minutes, Vexy's speech began to falter. She paused mid-sentence, touching her lips. She mentioned numbness around her mouth and tingling spreading to her tongue. Her words became slurred. She attempted to stand from her stool but stumbled, gripping the counter. Her balance wavered. She knocked into one of the ring lights, which clattered to the tile floor. Her arms began to hang stiffly at her sides. Muscle coordination visibly deteriorated. She tried to lift her hand to her face, but the movement was slow and uncontrolled. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, each breath more labored. Her friend stood and asked if she was okay. No coherent response came. She took 2 unsteady steps toward the sink and collapsed. Her body struck the tile floor, her cheek hitting first. She lay on her side, chest still moving, but with minimal effort. Her breathing slowed, the intervals between breaths lengthening. Her friend crouched beside her and called 911 at approximately 8:44 p.m. Emergency medical services arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics found Vexy unresponsive with extremely shallow respiration and a weak, irregular pulse. Her airway was compromised due to paralysis of respiratory muscles. She was intubated on site. During transport, her cardiac function deteriorated. Respiratory paralysis led to severe hypoxemia, precipitating cardiac arrest. Despite advanced intervention, Vexy Crute was pronounced dead shortly after arrival at the hospital. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death as tetrodotoxin poisoning consistent with improperly prepared pufferfish. The toxin likely contaminated the flesh during organ rupture, exposing her to an unpredictable but potentially lethal dose. Tetrodotoxin causes progressive paralysis with no antidote. Police collected the fish remains, cutting board, knives, and kitchen tools as evidence. Lab tests confirmed lethal concentrations of the toxin. Investigators found no indication of foul play. The death was ruled accidental self-poisoning due to consumption of an improperly prepared, restricted species. The live stream recording documented the entire sequence from preparation to collapse.
It was June 22, 2018, in Riverside County, California. The early afternoon was warm and dry as freight trains moved through a rural stretch of track that cut across rolling hills. The rail line curved through the terrain, limiting visibility in both directions. Low brush and dirt embankments lined the tracks, and the shape of the land reduced how early approaching trains could be seen or heard. Adam Perry was 19 years old. He worked part-time at an electronics store and spent much of his free time building a photography portfolio online. His page had roughly 4,200 followers. Adam focused on dramatic images taken in places that looked raw or dangerous. He believed those settings made his work stand out. Friends said he often searched for locations that most people avoided. Adam chose the rail line after scouting it on previous visits. He knew freight trains used the track regularly, but there was no posted schedule. Train movement depended on dispatch and traffic farther up the line. Adam relied only on what he had observed before and believed there would be enough warning time if a train approached. That afternoon, Adam arrived with his friend Jake, who agreed to help with the shoot. Adam brought a professional camera, extra lenses, and a shoulder bag with his equipment. The plan was to take a series of photos that framed the curve of the track stretching into the hills. At first, Jake posed several feet away from the rails while Adam photographed from the gravel shoulder. As the session continued, Adam adjusted his angles and stepped closer. He climbed onto the railroad ties to lower his camera position. Jake moved as directed, standing near the edge of the track while Adam worked. Adam's camera strap hung across his chest, connected to the equipment bag at his side. Neither of them had any protective gear or lookout system in place. The area was quiet except for wind moving through the brush. Because of the curve in terrain, sound carried unevenly. Jake was the first to notice movement down the line. From his position, he saw the front of a freight locomotive appear around the bend. Jake immediately shouted and waved to get Adam's attention. Adam was looking through the camera viewfinder and did not respond at first. He was focused on framing the shot and adjusting his position. When Adam finally looked up, the train was already much closer. It was moving at authorized freight speed and closing distance quickly. Adam turned to clear the tracks, stepping back toward the gravel shoulder. As he moved, the camera strap caught on his equipment bag, pulling him slightly off balance. The delay lasted only seconds. Adam stumbled and failed to clear the rails completely. The train engineer, seeing Adam on the track, applied emergency brakes immediately and sounded the horn. The train could not slow enough in the remaining distance. Adam was struck while still on the tracks. The impact caused fatal injuries. Jake witnessed the collision from nearby and remained clear of the rail line as the train passed. After the train came to a stop farther down the track, Jake called for help while staying clear of the rails. The train crew remained on site until the area was secured and rail traffic could resume safely. Adam's camera and damaged equipment were recovered near the ties where he had been standing moments earlier. The memory card inside the camera was intact and showed the progression of the shoot, including how close Adam had positioned himself to the active track before the train appeared around the curve. Service on the rail line resumed later that day. Adam's online accounts were never updated again, and the photographs taken during the session were never posted or shared publicly. It was September 8, 2015, in a remote desert wash 30 miles southeast of Phoenix, Arizona. The temperature had reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit by mid-afternoon, with the narrow canyon walls radiating heat like an oven. Paige Holloway was 26 years old and managed a retail clothing store during the week while spending her evenings trying to build a fitness influencer brand. Paige had been posting workout videos and motivational content for 18 months, but her follower count remained frustratingly stuck despite her constant efforts to create engaging content. Paige's fitness content was virtually indistinguishable from thousands of other influencers posting similar workout routines and inspirational quotes. She desperately needed something that would set her apart from the competition and potentially attract the attention of major fitness brands who might offer sponsorship deals. Her apartment was filled with ring lights, camera equipment, and workout gear that she had purchased with credit cards, betting everything on her eventual success as an influencer. Paige chose the Desert Wash for its dramatic 40-foot sandstone walls and natural golden hour lighting. She planned a choreographed workout combining yoga and calisthenics, believing the setting would finally produce the standout video her struggling fitness channel needed. On the morning of September 8th, Paige noticed dark storm clouds gathering over distant mountains, but the lighting conditions in the canyon were too perfect to postpone filming. She had driven 3 hours to reach this remote location and couldn't afford to waste the trip. Her filming partner expressed concern about the weather, but Paige insisted they proceed with the planned shoot. She set up multiple cameras throughout the narrow wash to capture different angles of her routine. She positioned herself in the deepest part of the canyon, where the towering walls created the most dramatic backdrop for her performance. The setup took over an hour, with Paige adjusting each camera angle to ensure perfect framing. Desert washes are particularly dangerous during monsoon season because they channel flash floods from distant rainfall. The narrow walls that create such stunning visuals also create deadly traps when water levels rise rapidly. Warning signs posted at the canyon entrance specifically cautioned visitors about flash flood risks, but Paige had ignored them in her focus on creating content. As she began filming her workout sequence, her partner operated cameras from the canyon rim 40 feet above. The storm clouds were now clearly visible 20 miles away, but Paige insisted on completing her planned routine. She had spent too much time and money on this shoot to abandon it over distant weather. Paige performed an elaborate yoga sequence in the canyon bottom, moving through a planned sequence of poses while maintaining perfect form for the cameras. She was completely focused on her performance, determined to create the viral content that would transform her struggling channel into a success story. Suddenly, her filming partner heard a distant rumbling sound that grew rapidly louder. Around the canyon bend, a fast-moving surge of muddy water several feet high appeared around the canyon bend. The flash flood had originated from rainfall in the distant mountains, channeling through the narrow wash system with devastating force. Paige had no time to react as the torrent knocked her off balance and swept her downstream along with her camera equipment. The canyon walls were too steep and smooth for her to climb to safety, and the current was far too powerful for swimming. Her partner remained on the canyon rim as the flood surged through the wash. Her filming partner immediately called rescue services, but the remote location delayed response times significantly. Search teams recovered Paige's body 4 days later, along with fragments of her camera equipment scattered throughout the wash. Investigators later confirmed that no usable footage was recovered from the damaged cameras, and the wash was temporarily closed following the incident. The case was ruled accidental death due to flash flooding in a restricted area. Paige died from drowning and blunt force trauma after being carried several miles downstream by the flood. It was September 14, 2017, inside a geothermal basin in Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. The boardwalk wound through a field of steaming ground and bright mineral pools. Visitors paused along the railings to photograph the colored water while thin clouds of steam drifted across the walkway. That afternoon, Logan Pierce, 28, arrived carrying a tripod, a camera, and a small action camera mounted on a telescoping pole. He had started a modest outdoor channel with about 4,000 subscribers only a few months earlier, shortly after ending a 6-year relationship. The two had built their lives around seasonal work across the western states, rafting in summer, ski lifts in winter, campground jobs in between. When the relationship ended, Logan found himself traveling alone. Filming trips through national parks became a way to stay occupied during long drives and quiet nights at campsites. On September 14th, he stopped along a boardwalk beside a steaming blue pool surrounded by pale mineral crust inside the geothermal basin. Visitors moved along the wooden walkway while thin clouds of steam drifted across the ground. Rangers regularly warned that the crust surrounding geothermal pools could collapse without warning. Beneath the pale mineral surface, boiling water often flowed through hidden channels. Logan positioned the tripod on the boardwalk and began filming a segment explaining how geothermal features worked and why visitors were required to remain on the walkway. To capture a closer view of the mineral surface, he extended the action camera on the telescoping pole over the railing. The pale crust appeared dry and solid from above. Small bubbles occasionally disturbed the bright blue water several feet away. Steam drifted across the basin as Logan leaned forward to adjust the camera angle. While steadying himself, his boot briefly pressed against the mineral surface just outside the railing. Visitors sometimes made similar balancing movements without realizing the crust could be fragile only inches beyond the walkway. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the surface beneath his foot cracked open. The crust collapsed in a narrow opening, and Logan's leg dropped straight through into a channel of scalding runoff water flowing beneath the mineral layer. Steam burst upward as he tried pulling himself backward. The crust around the opening began breaking apart while he struggled. Boiling water soaked through his pant leg within seconds. Witnesses later said he managed to twist his body and fall backward onto the boardwalk, pulling his leg free while steam continued venting from the hole beside the railing. Two nearby visitors rushed forward and dragged him farther away from the edge while others called park rangers. Logan remained conscious but was shaking and unable to stand. The lower portion of his pant leg had burned away where the water soaked through. Skin along his lower leg had already begun blistering from the extreme heat. Rangers arrived roughly 8 minutes after the emergency call. They secured the area and began first aid while staff prepared a helicopter landing zone nearby. About 30 minutes later, a rescue helicopter transported Logan to a regional hospital. Doctors treated Logan for extensive thermal injuries across much of his lower body. Water in geothermal runoff channels can exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to destroy tissue within seconds. Despite emergency treatment, his condition worsened from severe fluid loss and shock. He died later that evening. The medical examiner documented third-degree burns across more than half of his lower body. Investigators determined the collapse occurred where his boot had briefly pressed against the thin mineral crust just inches beyond the boardwalk rail. Beneath that fragile layer, a channel of near-boiling water had been flowing unseen. The death was ruled an accidental geothermal burn caused by crust failure outside the designated walkway. During the investigation, Park authorities reviewed Logan's phone and travel notes. Among the recent drafts was a short message written earlier that day to his former partner, describing how strange Yellowstone's geothermal basins felt, and remarking that if something ever happened to him while traveling, it would probably be in a place like that. It was July 22nd, 2016, in the mountains outside Denver, Colorado. The summer afternoon was clear and warm, with excellent visibility along the winding mountain highways that carved through the Rocky Mountain foothills. Lyra Stone was 28 years old and worked as an insurance adjuster for a regional company, spending her days investigating claims and processing paperwork. But her true passion lay in the mobile gaming phenomenon that had recently taken the world by storm. Lyra regularly spent her free time driving around the Denver metropolitan area to reported Pokémon locations while live streaming her activity to a growing online audience. That afternoon, she received reports from other players about a rare Pokémon spotted in a remote mountain location. Based on the community posts, this particular creature was extremely uncommon in the Colorado area. She quickly started a live stream, documenting her drive toward the reported rare Pokémon spawn in hopes of capturing exclusive footage. As the live stream continued, she drove toward the mountain location while focusing on tracking the reported spawn through the game interface. The live stream footage showed her repeatedly checking the game's location indicator while continuing toward the reported spawn site. As Lyra drove higher into the mountains, the urban landscape gave way to increasingly rugged terrain. The roads became more winding and narrow, with steep drop-offs and challenging curves that required careful attention to navigate safely. However, Lyra's focus remained divided between driving and monitoring her phone screen, where the game's interface displayed the Pokémon's location at close range. The live stream continued recording as she drove through the mountainous terrain, with the footage later showing her frequently shifting attention between the road and her phone. She held her phone in one hand while steering with the other, frequently glancing down at the screen to track the Pokémon's exact position and estimate her arrival time. The section of highway where the accident occurred was particularly challenging, featuring a sharp curve with a steep drop-off on one side and a rock wall on the other. The curve was marked with warning signs indicating a recommended speed of 25 miles per hour. But Lyra was traveling significantly faster while simultaneously trying to interact with her phone to monitor the game's proximity indicator. As she entered the curve, Lyra was looking down at her phone screen, trying to determine whether she needed to stop immediately or continue to a specific location ahead. The on-screen indicator showed the Pokémon's location nearby as the vehicle continued into the curve. At the time she entered the curve, the live stream footage showed the game interface active on her phone screen, and she failed to notice that the curve was sharper than she had anticipated and that her speed was far too high for safe navigation. Lyra's car crossed into the oncoming lane as she failed to turn sharply enough to follow the road's path. She overcorrected when she realized her error, but the vehicle's momentum carried it off the road entirely and over the guardrail. The car plunged down the steep mountainside, tumbling and rolling as it struck rocks and trees during its descent. The live stream continued recording throughout the accident, capturing the sounds of the crash and the destruction of the vehicle before the phone was finally destroyed. Lyra died from multiple traumatic injuries sustained during the vehicle's tumble down the mountainside. The investigation determined that she had been actively using her phone while driving, with the live stream recording providing clear evidence of her distracted driving in the moments before the crash. Skid marks on the highway showed that she had been traveling at excessive speed for the curve, and the vehicle's trajectory confirmed that she had lost control while not paying attention to the road. It was the evening of June 22, 2017, along a secondary freight rail spur running through a rural stretch of central Georgia. The line connected two small industrial towns, roughly 40 miles apart, passing through open farmland and a series of aging infrastructure crossings with minimal road traffic alongside it after dark. Tate Maskell was 26 years old and worked inconsistent shifts at a warehouse picking facility, taking assignments as they came and rarely holding a full week of work at a time. He had been running a stunt and urban exploration channel for 2 years, building his following around illegal access to active infrastructure. The content was framed around the trespass itself as much as the location, and each video referenced the previous one as a baseline to exceed. He had filmed himself inside drainage tunnels, on highway overpass supports, and on the rooftops of construction sites. In the months before the incident, he had referenced the freight train concept in at least 3 separate videos, describing it as the next logical step in a progression he had been building toward openly. He spent several weeks identifying a stretch of secondary spur track accessible from a back road, visiting the site twice on foot to time train intervals and observe speeds through a gentle curve near the access point. He identified the exterior ladder on the rear of passing boxcars as the intended ride point and confirmed the configuration was consistent across multiple cars. He prepared a chest-mounted camera and a handheld unit he planned to operate with one hand, a setup he had used on previous videos. On the evening of the incident, he drove to the access point after dark, passed through a gap in a perimeter fence where the spur ran close to the back road, and positioned himself beside the track. He waited for a train moving at reduced speed through the curve, grabbed the exterior ladder of a boxcar toward the rear of the consist as it passed, and pulled himself up onto the ladder. The train accelerated after clearing the curve. Secondary freight spurs of this type typically operate at between 40 and 50 miles per hour on straight sections between industrial stops, and the train reached the upper end of that range within the first mile. At that speed, maintaining a stable position on an exterior ladder required continuous grip pressure against the wind resistance pushing against the side of the car. Approximately 2 miles into the ride, the spur passed under an aging overpass carrying a private access road to a grain processing facility on the north side of the line. The overpass had a vertical clearance of approximately 17 feet above the rail surface at its lowest point. Standard boxcar height runs between 15 and 17 feet from the rail to the roof, which placed the exterior ladder on the car's sidewall within that clearance envelope when accounting for a person's body extending above the ladder's topmost rung. Tate was holding the upper rungs of the ladder with his head and shoulders above the roofline of the car as the overpass approached. The underside of the structure made contact with him at head and shoulder level as the car passed beneath it. He was separated from the ladder on impact and came to rest on the railbed beside the track. A worker at the grain facility had observed a figure on the exterior of the passing train from roughly 200 feet shortly before the overpass and reported it after the train cleared the area. No one witnessed the impact directly. Tate was found on the railbed by a track maintenance crew the following morning. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head and upper body, consistent with a fixed structure strike at speed. The chest camera was recovered at the scene with footage intact up to the moment of impact. Rather than citing evidentiary grounds, the reviewing authority withheld the footage from public release on the basis that it documented a criminal trespass and that releasing it served no purpose in the context of a closed accidental death ruling. No charges were filed against the rail operator, and the case was closed shortly after the review concluded. It was June 4th, 2019, in downtown Los Angeles. The sun had not fully risen yet, and the streets below were quiet except for early traffic and delivery trucks. An office building under renovation stood dark, with temporary fencing and warning signs posted at street level. The rooftop was unfinished, with sections of guardrails removed as crews prepared for new materials to arrive later that morning. Daniel Cruz, 24, entered the building through an unsecured stairwell just after 5:30 a.m. He worked evenings at a car wash and spent his free time filming parkour and urban exploration videos. His social media page had a little over 3,000 followers. He was not sponsored and had no formal training. His recent videos had been getting fewer views than before, and people close to him said he had been looking for something bigger to post. Daniel had visited the location twice in the weeks leading up to that morning. 2 office buildings stood across from each other, separated by a narrow service alley. From roof to roof, the horizontal gap measured just over 11 feet. Temporary renovation work had left both rooftops uneven. Loose gravel, dust, and small debris were scattered across the surface. He carried 2 small action cameras and his phone. After reaching the roof, Daniel placed one camera near the edge and another farther back to capture his run-up. He did not clear the gravel from the path. Instead, he adjusted the angles several times, stepping back and forth to check the framing. At the same time, a small construction crew arrived at the neighboring building. Two workers were on a lower rooftop preparing tools and inspecting equipment. From their position, they could see Daniel moving around on the opposite roof. One later said it was obvious he did not belong there. Daniel began pacing out his approach. He measured roughly 30 feet from the edge, walking it several times. He made multiple practice runs, accelerating toward the gap and stopping at the last second. The workers noticed his shoes slipping slightly during these attempts as gravel shifted underfoot. After several minutes, Daniel repositioned the camera again. He backed up to the start of his run and stood still for a short time. Witnesses said he appeared focused on the setup rather than the surface beneath him. On the final attempt, Daniel sprinted faster than before. As he reached the last few feet, his lead foot landed on loose gravel. The stones shifted forward and his foot slid just enough to throw off his balance. His takeoff was late and lower than intended. Daniel partially cleared the gap but struck the far building chest first just below the roofline. One worker described the sound as heavy and flat, not sharp. Daniel's upper body hit the wall and his arms came up briefly before he fell backward into the alley. As he fell, Daniel struck a metal fixture mounted to the building several stories down. The impact changed his position before he continued falling. The workers ran to the edge and shouted, but could not see the ground clearly from where they stood. Daniel was later found in the alley below, unresponsive. His phone was recovered near the edge of the roof where he had set it to record. Paramedics arrived shortly after and confirmed that he had sustained fatal blunt force trauma consistent with a high fall impact. The footage on the device showed his run-up, the slip at takeoff, and the moment his body left the frame. No video of the landing was captured. Within days, permanent safety barriers were installed on both rooftops involved. Daniel's social media account stopped updating, and the footage from that morning was never posted or shared publicly. It was January 18th, 2018. A white cargo van sat alone at a gravel turnout in the Mojave Desert, California. Overnight temperatures dropped below freezing. Inside the van, a small propane heater ran in a tightly sealed space. By morning, the vehicle looked quiet against the open desert. No one nearby realized the night inside had already turned fatal. Marina Cole, 29, had started a modest van life YouTube channel the year before. A freelance graphic designer from Phoenix, she had grown tired of moving between short contracts and small apartments. She sold most of her belongings, bought a used cargo van, and converted it into a simple mobile home. Her channel attracted about 5,000 subscribers. Marina filmed calm routines, cooking on a small stove, organizing storage bins, and hiking desert trails before parking beside empty landscapes. The videos showed quiet mornings and sunsets, a peaceful version of van life she carefully curated for viewers. During the second week of January, Marina drove across the Mojave looking for winter camping spots to film. Weather forecasts warned that nighttime temperatures would fall into the mid-20s. Travelers using heaters in enclosed vehicles were advised to keep the ventilation open. Marina carried a compact propane heater, commonly used by van campers. Most users left a window slightly cracked to allow fresh air inside. That night, however, the cold pushed her to seal the van more tightly. She closed the roof vent and packed towels into small gaps near the rear doors to keep warm air from escaping. By midnight, the interior had warmed enough for her to stop filming and settle onto the bed platform. The heater continued running near the floor. At some point during the early morning hours, the air inside the van began to change. The heater continued running in the sealed space as Marina rested inside, unaware that something dangerous was slowly building in the air around her. Inside the van, nothing dramatic would have seemed wrong. The heater ran quietly. Her phone and laptop remained on the fold-out desk beside the bed, and a mug sat near the stove from the last time she made tea. Marina likely became disoriented as the air inside the van slowly changed. Without realizing what was happening, she lay back down on the sleeping platform. She eventually lost consciousness while the heater continued running inside the sealed vehicle. When investigators later examined the van, they found no signs of struggle or attempts to leave the vehicle. The vehicle remained parked at the turnout for more than 2 weeks. Wind pushed sand against the tires and dust settled across the windshield. Hikers occasionally passed nearby, but nothing about the van appeared unusual among the scattered overnight campers. Concern began online instead of in the desert. Followers noticed Marina's social media accounts continued posting photos every few days. The updates described desert roads and quiet campsites, making it appear she was still traveling across the Southwest. One subscriber recognized a trailhead visible in the background of a scheduled post and contacted park authorities. Rangers drove to the turnout late that afternoon and knocked repeatedly on the van. When no one responded, they forced the rear doors open. Marina was found on the sleeping platform inside. A ranger radioed for emergency services at 4:12 p.m. Deputies and paramedics arrived about 20 minutes later, but Marina showed no signs of life. The heater had already shut off after the fuel cylinder emptied. The coroner later determined the cause of death as carbon monoxide poisoning. Blood tests showed extremely high levels of carboxyhemoglobin, meaning most oxygen-carrying cells in her body had been replaced by carbon monoxide. Investigators found no defect in the heater itself. The sealed van had allowed the gas to build slowly overnight. Authorities ruled the case an accidental death caused by improper ventilation. Investigators later discovered that Marina had scheduled weeks of posts before leaving Phoenix. While her van remained parked silently in the desert, her accounts continued uploading travel photos, creating the illusion that the journey was still ongoing.
It was March 3, 2015. The afternoon in Tulsa carried a damp chill with temperatures in the low 50s and gray clouds hanging over the residential neighborhoods. Inside a ground-floor apartment in a modest rental complex on the south side, the air was still. The unit was quiet, most neighbors at work or running errands. The bathroom was cramped, measuring about 5 by 8 feet, with tile covering the lower walls and a single overhead vent fan that had been neglected for years. No window, no external airflow. Just a narrow space with a door that opened inward and barely any gap underneath. Dallin Spive had the day off. At 22, he worked at a car wash during the week and used his spare time to film budget-friendly cleaning tutorials. He had no background in chemistry, no certifications, and no formal training in handling household chemicals. His content was built on experimentation, mixing products to see what worked best. The approach had earned him a small but loyal audience who appreciated the low-cost alternatives to expensive cleaners. That afternoon, he decided to film a grout-whitening hack. He positioned his phone on the edge of the bathroom sink, angling it toward the floor where a plastic bucket sat waiting. He had gathered 2 large containers earlier that day. One held roughly half a gallon of standard bleach. The other contained about the same amount of an ammonia-based multi-purpose cleaner. Both were common products available at any grocery store. He placed the bucket between the toilet and the tub and wedged a rolled towel against the bottom of the door. The vent fan stayed off. He wanted a controlled environment for the camera. Dallin poured the bleach first. It filled the bottom of the bucket, pooling to a depth of around 2 inches. Then he added the ammonia-based cleaner on top. The chemical reaction was instant. A toxic cloud of chloramine vapor formed instantly, releasing irritant gases capable of causing acute lung injury. The vapor surged upward from the bucket, dense and yellow-green. He leaned in close, holding the phone just above the mixture to capture the bubbling effect. He inhaled. The coughing started within seconds. Deep, uncontrollable spasms that forced him to drop the phone back onto the sink. His throat and lungs burned as the gas made contact with the moisture in his respiratory tract. He stumbled backward, slamming his hip into the sink edge. His breathing turned harsh and ragged, each attempt to inhale producing a wet, rasping sound. The vapor continued to rise, filling the small room with caustic fumes. He reached for the door handle, but his hand slipped. His legs buckled. He fell sideways, his shoulder crashing into the side of the bathtub before he slid down to the tile floor. The dense vapor accumulated near the floor, intensifying with every breath he took. He tried to crawl. His fingers scraped against the grout as he pulled himself forward, covering maybe 2 feet before his strength gave out. He collapsed onto his side, face toward the door he could not reach. The phone on the sink continued recording. The vapor thickened into a visible haze. Around 6:15 p.m., a neighbor detected a sharp chemical smell seeping through the shared wall. She contacted the building manager, who knocked and received no answer. Emergency services were called. Fire crews arrived with respiratory gear and detected dangerous chloramine gas levels before entering. They found Dallin unconscious on the bathroom floor. Frothy fluid surrounded his mouth and nose. His breathing breathing was barely detectable. Paramedics attempted emergency treatment, but his airway had sustained significant trauma. He was transported immediately, but respiratory function continued to deteriorate. Acute chemical pneumonitis progressed rapidly to non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. Dallin Spive was pronounced dead at 6:47 p.m. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be acute chloramine gas inhalation, resulting in chemical pneumonitis and complete respiratory failure. Fire officials documented both chemical containers, the bucket with residue, and the towel that had sealed the door. 2 nearby tenants were evaluated for minor exposure symptoms. The incident was classified as accidental. The phone footage was recovered and logged as evidence. Investigators confirmed no signs of foul play or external involvement. The combination of bleach and ammonia in an enclosed space had created lethal conditions within moments.
It was the afternoon of July 19, 2016, beneath an active high-voltage transmission corridor running through open ranch land outside a mid-sized city in Texas. The corridor carried a 345 kilovolt line between 2 regional power distribution points, supported by a series of lattice steel towers spaced at regular intervals across flat, treeless terrain, accessible by an unpaved service road running alongside the bases. Sid Furling was 38 years old and worked as a substitute science teacher a few days a week. He ran a physics and electricity channel focused on making electrical concepts visible and measurable on camera, with a modest following built around viewers with a general interest in science. He was knowledgeable about basic electrical principles at the consumer level, but treated that foundation as more comprehensive than it was, dismissing corrections from viewers with engineering backgrounds as overcaution rather than expertise. He drove the service road in the weeks before the shoot, identifying a tower with accessible lower infrastructure and a clear sightline for filming. He prepared a tripod camera positioned at a distance and a chest-mounted unit and scheduled the shoot for a Tuesday afternoon in late July, when sustained high temperatures across the state pushed regional power demand to its highest levels of the year. He arrived in the early afternoon, set up the tripod approximately 30 feet from the base, and began filming at ground level. The field readings were measurable but produced no immediate physical effect. After several minutes, he determined the ground level readings were not visually compelling enough and decided to climb the tower to get his meter closer to the conductors. The tower's lower access ladder started about 8 feet above the ground on the near face of the structure, reachable by stepping onto the first diagonal cross member and pulling up to the ladder base. He climbed to approximately 18 to 20 feet up the tower face. At that height, he remained well below the conductors themselves, which sat at approximately 80 feet at the lowest point of the catenary. Even without direct contact, transmission infrastructure of that voltage presents serious danger to anyone climbing or trespassing on the structure. While he remained well below the energized conductors, he was climbing active transmission infrastructure not designed for public access or demonstration. The structure itself presented a fall hazard independent of the electrical load above. He had been on the ladder for approximately 4 minutes, holding the EMF meter in his right hand and gripping a rung with his left, when the tripod camera recorded him releasing his left-hand grip. He fell from approximately 18 to 20 feet, landing on the dry, compacted ground at the base of the tower. A utility maintenance worker traveling the service road observed a figure on the tower face from roughly 300 feet away and saw him fall before pulling over. The working assessment from the medical review was that he lost his footing, or grip, while climbing active infrastructure and fell. The EMF meter was still recording field data when it was recovered at the scene. Sid was pronounced dead shortly after the utility worker reached him. The cause of death was listed as blunt force injuries sustained in the fall. The tripod camera had captured the full sequence from setup through the fall. The utility company that owned the transmission infrastructure saw it and obtained a legal hold on the footage, citing an ongoing liability review, which prevented its public release. The chest-mounted unit was damaged beyond recovery on impact. The case was ruled an accidental death, and the service road access point nearest the tower was subsequently gated and posted with updated no trespassing signage. It was August 7, 2018, when 26-year-old Nina Wright and her boyfriend Marcus began their descent into a remote side canyon in northern Arizona, toward a high-volume waterfall known locally as Twin Vale Falls. Nina worked as a marketing coordinator for a technology company while maintaining a small travel blog with approximately 3,800 Instagram followers. Her content focused on adventure destinations, and she had been planning the trip for months after seeing viral videos of people swimming near large, powerful waterfalls. The waterfall dropped roughly 180 feet into a narrow plunge pool and was experiencing unusually high flow due to recent monsoon storms. Warning signs had been posted along the trail about dangerous conditions, but Nina was determined to create content that would stand out from typical tourist photos. She carried a waterproof action camera and had convinced Marcus to film her attempt to swim in the plunge pool below the falls. The nearly 8-mile descent into the canyon took most of the day. Other backpackers they encountered warned about the strong currents, but Nina remained focused on her planned shoot. Marcus expressed concerns about the water conditions throughout their approach, noting the unusual volume and turbulence visible from the trail. Nina set up her waterproof camera on a stable rock ledge overlooking the pool and began recording continuous video intended for later upload, occasionally speaking toward the camera as if addressing her audience. The plunge pool was estimated to be roughly 40 feet across, with depths believed to exceed 30 feet near the base. The recirculating hydraulic created by the falling water was clearly visible as a churning white zone directly beneath the cascade. Nina entered the water wearing a standard life jacket and initially stayed near the calmer edges of the pool. The recorded footage later reviewed showed her gradually moving closer to the turbulent center, despite Marcus signaling from shore for her to maintain distance. When Nina reached the hydraulic zone, the powerful recirculating current immediately pulled her underwater. The turbulence forced the improperly secured life jacket up over her shoulders, rendering it ineffective within seconds, and she became trapped in the washing machine effect, created by a massive volume of water falling continuously. The hydraulic held her in a continuous cycle of being pulled down and pushed back toward the base of the falls. Marcus attempted to reach her from the rocky shoreline, but could not safely enter the dangerous current. 2 other hikers who witnessed the incident also tried to assist but were unable to approach the hydraulic zone without risking their own safety. Nina remained trapped in the hydraulic for a short period before her body was eventually released downstream. By the time bystanders could reach her in the calmer water, she had drowned. The recovered footage showed the entire sequence from her entry into the pool until she disappeared beneath the surface. Marcus activated his satellite emergency communicator immediately after the incident. Due to the remote location, backcountry access restrictions, and monsoon weather conditions, aerial recovery operations were delayed for several hours. Recovery teams retrieved Nina's body from the pool using specialized swift water rescue equipment. The camera continued recording unattended after the incident until its battery failed. The footage was later secured and never publicly released. Authorities later reviewed the incident and classified it as an accidental drowning. The official report noted that Nina had entered a known hydraulic hazard despite posted warnings and adverse conditions. Her waterproof camera provided crucial evidence about the sequence of events leading to her death. Following the incident, park authorities enhanced warning signage about hydraulic dangers and implemented additional safety briefings for backcountry permits. The case highlighted the risks associated with swimming near high-volume waterfalls, particularly during periods of elevated flow. It was March 15, 2016 in Atlanta, Georgia. The city's downtown area buzzed with late-night activity, but in the shadows of the business district stood a massive concrete parking garage, empty and silent after hours. Atticus Vale was 23 years old and worked part-time at a retail electronics store during the day. For 6 months, Atticus had been filming videos of himself performing tricks and stunts on his hoverboard, posting them across multiple social media platforms. His YouTube channel showed consistent activity with new uploads 3 to 4 times per week, always chasing the next viral moment that would push him into the upper tier of action sports influencers. Atticus had identified a downtown parking garage as the filming location for a new video. The structure consisted of multiple levels with wide open spaces and evenly spaced concrete pillars, creating narrow corridors that could be used for weaving and high-speed navigation. On the night of March 15th, Atticus arrived at the parking garage just after midnight when the building was completely empty and security was minimal. He carried his equipment to the 3rd level, which offered the longest straightaway and the most interesting obstacle configuration. The concrete floor was smooth and clean, providing ideal conditions for hoverboard riding. Atticus methodically set up his cameras, testing each angle and adjusting the lighting to ensure the best possible footage quality. Atticus began the filming session with a moderate speed run through the course. The hoverboard moved smoothly as he weaved between the concrete pillars. Following the initial pass, he increased his speed for a second run, pushing the device closer to its maximum operating range. For his third attempt, Atticus positioned himself at the far end of the straightaway, nearly 200 feet from the first concrete barrier. What the footage revealed was that this section of the garage had a subtle but measurable downward slope of approximately 4 degrees, designed for water drainage. This incline would add gravitational acceleration to his run, compounding his speed beyond what he had experienced on the level sections below. He activated his primary camera and began accelerating down the sloped corridor. The hoverboard quickly reached speeds exceeding 15 miles per hour, faster than his previous runs, with the downward grade continuing to add momentum as he approached the barrier section. At higher speed, the device began to vibrate and wobble beneath his feet as it moved beyond its stable operating range on the inclined surface. As he neared the barrier section, Atticus attempted to initiate the sharp turn around the first concrete pillar. The combination of speed, slope, and smooth concrete reduced traction, causing the wheels to lose grip and the hoverboard to slide sideways while still moving forward. He shifted his weight in an attempt to regain control, but the slide continued unchecked toward the concrete barrier. Within seconds, the collision occurred, throwing him forward off the hoverboard and directly into the pillar. The impact was captured clearly by his stationary camera. Atticus's head struck the concrete barrier with tremendous force, the sound of the collision echoing through the empty garage. His body went immediately limp, and he collapsed to the floor beside the pillar, motionless. The hoverboard continued sliding across the concrete until it came to rest against a wall, its motors still running quietly in the sudden silence. Atticus died instantly from severe head trauma caused by the impact with the concrete barrier. The investigation revealed that the hoverboard had been functioning normally and within its design parameters. Security footage confirmed that Atticus had been alone during the incident, and his own camera equipment provided clear documentation of the entire sequence of events leading to the fatal collision. Investigators determined that the combination of the sloped surface and his pursuit of high-speed footage had created the fatal conditions that night.
It was September 22, 2018. The abandoned hotel on the eastern edge of downtown Gary, Indiana, stood as another marker of the city's industrial decline. Built in the 1920s, the brick building had weathered badly, most windows broken or boarded, a chain-link fence full of gaps surrounding it. Inside, the 40 by 30-foot lobby featured a grand staircase and decades of neglect. Warped floorboards, water stains, sagging patches from roof leaks. Dusk was settling, weak natural light filtering through broken windows. Merritt Glade arrived alone. At 29, he worked as a freelance videographer, building a portfolio focused on abandoned architecture and urban decay. He carried roughly 18 pounds of equipment, a camera, 2 lenses, a tripod, and a stabilizer rig. His content emphasized atmospheric shots over thorough exploration. He had visited dozens of abandoned sites over the past 3 years, usually without permission. He entered through a side door that had been pried open previously. His focus was on lighting and composition, not structural integrity. He had no training in building safety or hazard assessment. The lobby offered the kind of visual decay he sought. Peeling wallpaper, dust suspended in the fading light, and the skeletal remains of a reception desk. He moved slowly, testing angles and adjusting camera settings. The floor creaked under his weight in several places, but he attributed it to the age of the building. He stepped carefully around obvious holes and missing sections, but paid less attention to discolored areas that appeared intact from the surface. He positioned himself near the center of the room, adjusting the tripod height. Then he moved a few feet to his left, eyes on the camera screen rather than the floor beneath him. He stepped onto a darkened patch of wood that looked solid but had been compromised by rot and moisture. The boards gave a sharp crack. They collapsed instantly under his combined weight and the equipment he carried. He fell through the opening. The drop measured approximately 8 feet into a crawl space beneath the lobby. His body twisted as he descended. A vertical rusted iron pipe, roughly 2 inches in diameter, protruded from the crawlspace floor where old plumbing had been abandoned. The pipe penetrated his left upper abdomen just below the rib margin. The force of the fall drove it deep into soft tissue, tearing through internal structures and major blood vessels. His momentum carried him forward, and he slid off the pipe, collapsing onto the dirt floor below. The camera, still recording, had fallen separately and landed lens up several feet away. The audio captured a strangled cry, then labored, irregular breathing. He attempted to draw breath, to press his hands against the wound, but the rapid internal blood loss caused dizziness and loss of consciousness within moments. The sounds grew quieter and more spaced out. Within less than 2 minutes, silence followed. His absence was not noticed immediately. He lived alone and worked independently, with no family in the immediate area and few close friends who tracked his whereabouts. His irregular work schedule meant days could pass without contact. 3 days later, a property inspector conducting a routine check discovered his vehicle still parked near the building. Police were notified. Officers found Merritt in the crawl space below. His clothing was saturated with dried blood. The rusted pipe stood vertically where it had struck him. Emergency personnel confirmed no signs of life. The body was transported to the county medical examiner. The autopsy documented a penetrating abdominal wound, massive internal hemorrhage due to vascular injury was confirmed. The cause of death was listed as exsanguination from traumatic impalement. Police investigators documented the scene, the equipment, and the compromised flooring. The building owner was contacted, and the property was later secured more thoroughly. No evidence of third-party involvement was found. The death was ruled accidental. Merritt Glade was officially pronounced dead at the scene, though time of death was estimated to have occurred shortly after the fall 3 days earlier. His final footage showed the moments leading up to the collapse, but not the fall itself, where Merritt's pursuit of the perfect shot led him into a crumbling structure. Another creator's focus on wellness content would bring an unexpected danger into his own home. In Raleigh, a lifestyle vlogger was about to test a product sent by a follower, unaware of what it contained.
It was September 19, 2017, in a small apartment building near Glendale Boulevard in Los Angeles, California. The building was quiet that evening, and nothing unusual could be seen from the outside. Hours later, investigators would enter one of the units and begin reconstructing a sequence of events that had already ended in tragedy. Just months before that night, Bella Vane, 23, had been trying to grow a small beauty and fashion channel online. She filmed makeup tutorials, clothing hauls, and casual updates from her apartment bedroom. Her audience was small but loyal. Most videos drew only a few hundred views, but she treated each upload as progress toward becoming a full-time creator. Over time, Bella began experimenting with more dramatic content. She started posting videos suggesting someone might be watching her apartment. Viewers were encouraged to look for reflections in mirrors or shadows in hallways that might reveal a hidden stalker. The series quickly became her most discussed material, and her channel passed 3,000 subscribers during that period. On the evening of September 19th, Bella prepared another video continuing the storyline. She intended to claim someone had entered her apartment earlier that day. The plan was to stage a tense scene in the bathroom while describing strange noises she believed were coming from the building. Earlier that afternoon, maintenance workers had opened a ceiling access panel in the hallway to inspect plumbing lines. Bella mentioned the activity online and suggested someone could move through the crawl space above the apartments, which fit the narrative she had been building. Inside the apartment, she arranged the setting for the video. The bathroom lights were dim, and a small ring light illuminated the room. The bathtub had been filled nearly to the overflow drain. At some point later that night, something interrupted the routine she had planned. Bella stopped responding to messages from friends and followers who expected updates. Hours passed without any activity from her accounts. When repeated attempts to contact her failed, someone requested a welfare check at the apartment. Officers arrived at the building and knocked several times before forcing entry when no one answered. Bella was found on the bathroom floor beside the bathtub. Paramedics attempted resuscitation inside the apartment, but she showed no pulse and was not breathing. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death through autopsy findings. Bruising around the neck and small hemorrhages in the eyes indicated manual strangulation. The pressure had restricted blood flow to the brain long enough to cause fatal oxygen deprivation, And with the cause of death confirmed, investigators began examining Bella's recent online activity and the storyline she had been building around a supposed stalker. Messages recovered from her accounts revealed frequent contact with one follower who had become unusually involved in the narrative. Detectives also learned that small incidents Bella had mentioned online, objects moved in the hallway and noises above the apartment, may not have been imagined. Further investigation showed that the same individual had entered the building's crawl space after seeing Bella mention the hallway access panel in her posts, moving items in shared areas to reinforce the stalking story she was telling. Security footage later showed the man leaving the property that night. He was eventually identified and located by investigators. During questioning, he admitted visiting the apartment after following Bella's posts about the crawl space and the supposed intruder. According to investigators, he believed he was helping create a more convincing scene for her content. Authorities concluded that the encounter turned into a struggle inside the bathroom, where Bella was fatally strangled. The case was officially ruled a homicide. Investigators concluded that the follower had entered the apartment after becoming involved in the stalking storyline Bella had been posting online. The man was later arrested and charged with murder after authorities determined the encounter escalated into a struggle inside the bathroom where Bella Vane was fatally strangled. It was the night of March 14, 2016. On a two-lane highway outside a mid-sized city in Nevada. The road ran flat and straight for nearly 4 miles before curving gradually toward the outskirts of the next town, with no streetlights past the first few hundred yards and minimal traffic after midnight. Mitch Colby was 34 years old and ran a car modification channel that had lost most of its audience and sponsorships following a public controversy 2 years prior. He had been unemployed for 8 months at the time of the incident, having left a store manager position at an auto parts retailer after a dispute with the owner. The car in his garage was a rear-wheel drive coupe he had been building for 3 years and had referenced repeatedly on camera, describing its performance figures and what it was capable of at full throttle on open road. It represented most of what remained of the money the channel had generated during its better years. In the weeks before the incident, he announced a planned night run across several short videos, describing it as a return to the kind of content the channel had originally been built on. The announcement drew more engagement than anything he had posted in months. He drove the route twice in the days prior at normal speed, noting the road surface condition, the absence of traffic at that hour, and the placement of the curve at the far end of the straight. He treated both runs as confirmation that the route was suitable. On the night of the incident, he spent several hours in the garage going over the car before loading his equipment. He mounted a wide-angle camera to the dashboard using a suction bracket he had used on previous drives and positioned a second unit against the rear window using the same method. He left his residence shortly after midnight and drove to the highway entrance at the edge of the city, where the road opened up and the last of the streetlights ended. Conditions were dry, with temperatures in the low 60s and no wind. He pulled onto the highway and accelerated from a near stop at the city limits, bringing the vehicle up through its power band along the straight section. The road ahead was unlit and empty. Based on physical evidence and camera footage recovered from the scene, the vehicle reached an estimated speed of over 110 miles per hour before reaching the curve at the end of the 4-mile straight. The curve required braking and steering input well in advance at that speed. Nevada two-lane highways in flat desert terrain typically feature gradual curves with advisory speeds posted between 45 and 55 miles per hour, meaning the margin between the posted advisory and the speed Mitch was carrying into the curve was more than double. The dashboard footage showed no braking before the curve. The vehicle crossed into the opposing lane, left the road surface at the outer edge of the curve, traveled across a gravel shoulder, and dropped into a concrete drainage culvert running parallel to the highway. The car struck the near wall of the culvert and came to rest inverted at the base of the channel. A driver traveling in the opposite direction observed the vehicle leave the road and pulled over at the shoulder. A second motorist arriving shortly after observed the car from the road above. Neither witness had a direct sightline to the vehicle before it left the road surface, and both reported the same departure point consistent with what the dashboard footage later confirmed. The dashboard camera survived the impact with partial footage intact, covering the approach and the moment the vehicle crossed the shoulder. The rear unit was destroyed on impact and yielded nothing usable. Mish was found unresponsive by the first witnesses on scene and was pronounced dead shortly after. The cause of death was blunt force trauma sustained from the impact with the culvert wall. The partial dashboard footage was retained by the reviewing authority as part of the evidentiary record and was not released publicly. The case was ruled an accidental death. No other vehicles were involved, and no charges were filed against any other party. The gap in the guardrail at the point where the vehicle left the road was subsequently flagged for repair as part of a routine infrastructure review of that stretch of highway. It was September 14, 2018, when 24-year-old Elena Young arrived at a rocky coastal cliff area near San Diego with her two-person camera crew for what she planned as her most ambitious content creation yet. Elena worked as a yoga instructor at a wellness center while building her fitness influencer brand with about 3,500 followers across multiple platforms. Her competitive nature and drive to create increasingly extreme content had been escalating over recent months as she faced pressure from younger influencers entering her space. Elena had spent weeks researching cliff diving locations and studying tide charts for this specific shoot. The rocky coastline in the area featured dramatic 60 to 70-foot drops into the Pacific Ocean, but the area was known for its unpredictable underwater rock formations and variable water depths depending on tidal conditions. Her crew consisted of a videographer and a drone operator, both experienced in outdoor content creation. They arrived during low tide conditions, which Elena had specifically chosen under the mistaken belief that it would provide clearer water visibility for her footage. However, the low tide also significantly reduced water depth over the submerged rock shelves below the cliffs. Elena set up multiple camera angles, including a drone positioned to capture aerial footage of her planned dive. She began live streaming to several hundred viewers, many of whom encouraged her to attempt the jump from the highest accessible point. The live stream footage later recovered by investigators showed Elena discussing her plan to dive from approximately 70 feet above the water. A surfer paddling in the nearby break observed Elena's preparations and later told authorities he had considered warning her about the shallow conditions, but was too far away to communicate effectively. Several beachwalkers on the bluff trail also witnessed the setup but did not intervene. Elena executed what appeared to be a technically sound dive, entering the water feet first after a brief fall lasting only a few seconds. However, the low tide had significantly reduced the water depth in her landing zone, where submerged rock shelves and boulders lay just beneath the surface. Her feet struck the underwater rock formation at high velocity, causing severe injuries to her lower extremities and spine. The impact immediately impaired her ability to swim or maintain buoyancy. Elena submerged and was unable to surface on her own due to her injuries. The surfer who had been watching paddled toward the impact site, but required significant time to fight lateral surge and reach the area where Elena had gone under. By the time he located her underwater, she had already drowned. He brought her to accessible rocks with assistance from bystanders who had climbed down from the cliff trail. Emergency responders arrived shortly after the initial rescue efforts began, but resuscitation attempts were unsuccessful. Elena was pronounced dead at the scene. The drone footage captured the entire sequence from her dive through the rescue attempts, providing investigators with substantial visual documentation. The live stream continued briefly after the incident, capturing emergency response efforts before platform administrators terminated the feed following viewer reports. The footage revealed that Elena had not adequately assessed the water depth or identified the submerged hazards in her chosen landing zone. County medical examiners determined the cause of death as drowning secondary to traumatic injuries sustained during impact with underwater rocks. The official report noted that low tide conditions had created a hazardous situation that Elena had not properly evaluated. Following the incident, local authorities installed additional warning signage about variable water depths and underwater hazards at popular cliff areas. Patrol frequency was increased during peak weekend hours when cliff jumping activity typically occurred. The case prompted discussions within the influencer community about safety protocols for extreme content creation. Elena's death highlighted the risks associated with cliff diving in unfamiliar locations without a proper assessment of underwater conditions and tidal variations. It was September 12, 2015, in Las Vegas, Nevada. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the industrial district on the outskirts of the city, where abandoned warehouses and empty lots created an urban landscape perfect for extreme sports enthusiasts. Orion Sterling was 24 years old and worked the night shift at a distribution warehouse, loading trucks and managing inventory in the sprawling facility outside the city. His days were free, and he spent them pursuing his passion for parkour and free running, filming elaborate sequences that he posted across multiple social media platforms. Recent videos featuring larger drops and longer jumps had drawn higher engagement, leading him to plan a more extreme sequence designed to stand out from similar parkour content online. He had discovered an abandoned warehouse complex in the industrial district that featured multiple buildings of varying heights, connected by a network of fire escapes, loading docks, and rooftop access points. The layout was perfect for an elaborate parkour sequence that would demonstrate advanced techniques while showcasing the dramatic urban environment. Orion spent several days scouting the complex and planning a route across multiple buildings, ending with a jump from the tallest warehouse to a lower adjacent structure. He recruited 2 roommates to film the sequence from different positions, and on the afternoon of September 12th, they arrived at the site with camera equipment and began setting up under clear, calm weather conditions. The first portion of the planned sequence involved navigating the lower buildings and fire escape systems, moves that were within Orion's established skill level. He completed these elements without visible difficulty as his friends captured the action from multiple angles, producing footage that highlighted both his technique and the industrial setting. The final element of the sequence required Orion to climb to the roof of the tallest warehouse building, approximately 3 stories high, and attempt to jump to the roof of an adjacent structure, approximately 18 to 20 feet away. As Orion prepared for the final stunt, his friends positioned themselves on the ground level to film the jump from below. Footage later showed hesitation among the group as they adjusted their positions and watched the distance between the buildings. Orion proceeded with the attempt without additional setup or safety equipment. Standing at the edge of the warehouse roof, Orion paused briefly before stepping back to begin his approach. The target building was visible across the gap, with no intermediate landing points between the 2 structures. Later review of the footage showed that the distance exceeded any jumps previously documented in his recordings. Orion began his approach run, sprinting across the warehouse roof to build maximum speed before reaching the edge. He launched himself toward the target building with full commitment, extending his body to achieve maximum distance while maintaining proper form for landing. However, his calculations had been flawed, and he had underestimated both the horizontal distance and the vertical drop involved in the jump. The recording captured Orion falling several feet short of the target building and plunging 3 stories to the concrete alley below as his friends witnessed the fall from the ground level. The impact with the concrete surface was devastating, and Orion's body lay motionless in the alley as his friends rushed to reach him. Orion died from massive trauma sustained in the fall, including fatal head and spinal injuries caused by the impact with the concrete surface below. Investigators classified the death as accidental, resulting from an attempted rooftop parkour jump performed during filming. Measurements taken after the incident showed that the horizontal gap between the buildings exceeded 18 feet, placing it at the extreme upper limit of documented parkour jumps and leaving no margin for error. It was November 3rd, 2018, on a remote ranch property in West Texas, 60 miles from the nearest town. The temperature had reached 78 degrees Fahrenheit under clear skies, with flat, barren landscapes stretching endlessly in every direction. Axel Stone was 29 years old and worked as a delivery driver for a local courier service while spending his evenings building DIY science projects for his YouTube channel. Axel had been posting videos of homemade experiments for 2 years, gradually escalating from simple chemistry demonstrations to elaborate engineering projects that pushed the boundaries of safety and legality. His subscriber count had grown to 6,200 followers who enjoyed his fearless approach to dangerous builds and complete disregard for proper safety protocols. Axel's garage workshop was filled with power tools, chemical supplies, and half-finished projects that would have horrified any professional engineer. He had no formal training in chemistry or engineering, relying entirely on internet research and trial and error experimentation. Previous videos had featured homemade explosives, improvised rocket engines, and electrical devices that regularly caught fire during testing. Axel's most successful video showed a homemade rocket reaching roughly 200 feet, drawing 75,000 views and prompting viewers to push him toward larger, more extreme projects. Seeking to escalate, he planned a much bigger rocket and intended to ride it himself to capture first-person footage. He chose a potassium nitrate and sugar fuel mixture after online research, believing it offered high thrust using accessible materials. He secured permission to work on a remote West Texas ranch by promising the owner a share of future video revenue, counting on the isolation to avoid interference. Over 3 weeks, Axel built a 10-foot rocket from PVC pipe and salvaged metal parts, attaching a crude harness so he could strap himself to the device. With no formal training, guide systems, or safety equipment, he relied entirely on internet tutorials, convinced his preparation was sufficient, despite ignoring basic rocket engineering and safety principles. On the afternoon of November 3rd, Axel strapped himself to the side of his homemade rocket using climbing harnesses and rope. He had positioned multiple remote cameras around the launch site to capture the event from different angles, expecting the footage to become his most viral content ever and launch his career as a professional content creator. Axel's fuel mixture was far more unstable than he realized, mixed in improper ratios and packed into a poorly constructed motor casing. Unlike professionally manufactured rocket engines, his homemade design lacked pressure relief, reinforcement, and quality control, making failure during ignition highly likely. When Axel ignited the motor, the rocket catastrophically failed instead of producing controlled thrust. The casing ruptured under sudden pressure, sending burning fuel and metal fragments outward as the structure disintegrated at ground level. The remote cameras captured the sudden failure and fire before the footage cut off. With no witnesses and no scheduled check-in, the remote launch site went unnoticed until the ranch owner discovered the debris field 2 days later during a routine property check and contacted authorities. Investigators recovered the damaged cameras and reviewed the footage as part of the inquiry, determining the incident resulted from reckless construction and the use of an improvised rocket device in hazardous conditions. Axel died from blast trauma, fragmentation injuries, and severe burns at the launch site,